Hey guys, Jack here, and today I wanted to talk about something very close to my heart. Something that's given me many great experiences and something that I feel is currently missing from the Battlefield genre of games. That something is competitive gaming, and hopefully after you watch this video, whether you've been a competitive gamer or not, will spur you on to want full competitive and esports support in Battlefield 4. I thought I'd start by saying why I want proper support for this type of thing in BF4. How it can benefit us and how it can benefit DICE and ultimately EA. I really believe that at this moment in time there's an opportunity for a new first person shooter to come along and be represented as the premier competitive PC FPS game. It used to be Counter-Strike and then after that Counter-Strike Source. Now of course Counter-Strike Go has been released, but it hasn't really taken off in the same way that previous iterations of the game did. CS had big money tournaments like the CPL, the SWC, WCG, DreamHack. Counter-Strike Source had things like the CGS, where players were salaried for 6 months and flown to America to compete on TV for $1 million. Not to mention the other big European LAN tournaments of years gone by, such as I-Series, LAN 79 and TEX. CSGO hasn't really got to that point yet, although there are rumours Valve are planning to announce a CSGO International $1 million tournament similar to the one that they ran for Dota 2 for the last 2 years. Speaking of Dota 2, esports has been dominated recently by non-FPS games like Dota 2, League of Legends and StarCraft 2. Huge money tournaments are popping up all over the place for these games, but where are the first person shooters? If you go on Twitch TV on any given day and check out the homepage, you're likely to see about 60,000 people watching League of Legends, 40,000 people watching Dota 2 and 20,000 watching StarCraft 2. The only first person shooter that makes it onto the front page on a regular basis is Black Ops 2 with an average of about 5,000 viewers. About Black Ops 2 by the way, Xbox have recently announced the Call of Duty Championship, which is going to be taking place in April in Los Angeles, and we'll see 32 teams from all over the world competing for a share of $1 million. The first place team will receive $400,000. Now that is amazing for FPS esports in general, but it's not perfect. Number one, it's on Xbox. I know that sounds selfish, but it's not great for us hardcore PC gamers. And number two, I don't think that Black Ops 2 is a particularly good competitive game. They play 3 different game modes and they still have things like score streaks and perks permitted in their rule sets. So why couldn't a company like EA or DICE do something like that for Battlefield 4? I think that would be an excellent idea, and I'll explain why after this. Now, they did actually advertise something similar to this for Battlefield 3. You guys remember the $1.6 million Battlefield 3 World Conquest Tournament that was announced in late 2011 in partnership with Virgin Media? What happened to that? Well, it never happened at all. The last thing we heard about it was that it was going to take place sometime in 2012, but that never happened. And all 3 parties, DICE, EA and Virgin, have remained quiet on the matter when asked about it. Now, I don't know why this tournament never happened. There isn't much information on it, and hey, who knows, the optimistic amongst us might hope that it would still actually happen this year. I don't think it will, but what I do think is that if it had happened, it would have drummed up lots of publicity, pleased fans, and also sold many more copies of the game. So why didn't it happen? Well, I don't know exactly why, like I said, but I bet one of the reasons is because Battlefield 3 didn't have a proper spectator function and some obvious problems as a competitive game. Spectator mode. I thought I'd get this one out of the way as early as possible, as it is one of the most hotly debated topics for Battlefield 3. Now BF2 had a pretty badass battle recorder, but no one was ever really sure if BF3 was going to have a spectator mode. It was teased by the developers and the community managers, but it never really confirmed and it never came to fruition or saw the light of day in the public. I say in the public because some members of the DICE video team have said that they have an internal battle recorder / spectator mode thingy, and they use that for BF3 trailers, but apparently it's very basic and it's also very hard to use, buggy, unintuitive, and it wouldn't really be fit for public use. Fair enough, DICE make their own game, they decide what features it will and won't have, but I truly believe that if Battlefield 4 doesn't have a spectator function or a battle recorder of some sort, it will be a massive mistake and ultimately hamper sales of the game. So why do I think it would hamper sales of the game? Well, primarily it would be a letdown to the whole Battlefield community, but also not having a battle recorder or spectator mode takes away so many possibilities for BF4. In my opinion, I think DICE cannot afford to not have a battle recorder. So what are these possibilities? Well, one of them is the ability to have BF4 as a serious competitive game that can be spectated online and also at LAN tournaments. You can't have a successful competitive game without the ability to spectate and record it. Now let me tell you a little story about Battlefield 3. In summer of 2012 I attended a BF3 LAN tournament in the UK called I-46. The I-Series is the UK's biggest LAN. They run the event 3 times a year in a big exhibition centre and up to 3,000 people attend each time. Now my team got to the final of the tournament, which we expected was going to be played on the stage in front of a crowd and commentated on, seeing as it was a prize money tournament. Other games on the stage included CSS, World of Tanks, League of Legends, even COD 4. However, we were disappointed when we found out the final would have to be played from our seats, and the only way people could watch was if they literally stood behind us. Having spoken with the admins, they decided that as BF3 was such a hard game to spectate, that the trouble of getting it all set up on the stage for the crowd to see and the ability to see everyone's screens, it just wasn't worth the effort. No one online could watch it. The only way was to be there, or for some of us to record from our POV and upload it to YouTube at a later date. Not exactly ideal for the spectators. Also, we'd had some cracking games throughout the tournament, so I'm sure many fans of competitive Battlefield would like to have watched. Sadly, BF3 was dropped from the next LAN event, the admins citing the lack of a spectator mode as one of the main reasons. So why would having a spectator mode help drive sales? Number 1, it entices sponsors and companies that run LAN events like these to include the game in their tournament lists because it can be easily spectated, commentated on and recorded. They create a competition and put prize money up. They then go and advertise it online. Person A on the internet sees this and gets all excited. They then go and tell 4 of their mates that they have a chance of winning some money by playing a video game. They all go out and buy that game. They practice for the tournament, download replays to watch for tactics and turn up to the LAN event to compete. In other words, big tournaments with big money and big names behind them create buzz and entice people to get involved. Now imagine for a second that EA gave an esports organisation like the ESL $100,000 in prize money for a Battlefield 4 launch LAN competition that can be streamed and spectated online. The lineup, the viewers and the turnout for something like that would be huge. Number 2, awesome videos. Internet is the new TV. Most kids and teenagers don't watch TV much anymore. Instead, we live in an internet age where YouTube and streaming sites like Twitch TV provide constant entertainment for those with similar interests. Users can subscribe to their favourite channels and view new content daily. More importantly, they can communicate with content creators and other viewers directly after watching a video. You can't do that with TV. That is the beauty of YouTube. Over the last couple of years, I think that some game developers and publishers have begun to respect the power of YouTube for the purpose of driving sales. I think Battlefield in particular has benefited greatly from that. And I often think to myself, I wonder how many copies of Battlefield 3 were sold thanks to videos like Renzook by Stungravy. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that's got like 10 million views where he jumps out of a jet, he blows up another jet with an RPG and then he gets back in his original jet. And the first time you saw it, you were blown away and you probably shared it with people who don't even play games. Hell, in the UK that video made it onto national newspapers like The Sun. But what if Stungravy wasn't recording at that moment? BF3 doesn't have a built-in recorder, so he would have been screwed. What if he didn't have a good enough PC to record on, or he didn't have a capture card if he was playing on the Xbox? That epic moment would have been lost forever and stored only in the mind of Stungravy himself. That ain't gonna sell any games. Now imagine how many other epic moments like that in BF3 have been lost because someone wasn't recording using external software and hardware at the time. My brain hurts even thinking about it. But if BF4 has a battle recorder, all those super cool moments can be shared online for everyone to see and everyone to share, and then those people are going to go out and buy the game. People who don't own the game will then watch that and think to themselves, hell, that looks like a lot of fun. I want to go and do that. Here's $60, they purchase Battlefield 4 and there's another sale for DICE and EA. Viral marketing is huge and user created content is driving that like crazy at the moment for video games. I mean, the users create it, the marketing guys don't even have to spend any money there. What is there to lose? Your customer's having fun, he uploads a video he can share because of Battlerecorder, people watch it online, they tweet about it, they like it on Facebook, and from that you drive more sales of the game. Now Battlefield 3 was and still is an awesome tool for making videos. Creating YouTube content is a big part of my life now and part of my work as well, so I'm very grateful to EA and DICE for letting me monetize Battlefield 3 videos on my channel. I have to thank DICE and EA partly for the success of my YouTube channel because without BF3 some of my most popular videos wouldn't have been possible. I couldn't have filmed some of them on other games or created them from scratch. It's just, that's the way it is. I'm no good with 3D or CGI, so when I got my hands on Battlefield 3 for the first time I was like a kid in a candy store. Having your own BF3 server is like having your own movie set. You don't need props, clothing, equipment, you don't need pyrotechnics or CGI explosions. It's all there available in real time for you to do whatever you like with. All you got to do is come up with an idea, get some friends to be actors for you and record it using software like Fraps. And I really hope that because some of my videos, copies of Battlefield 3 have been sold. I mean, I love the game, I've played over 600 hours on it and I think it's a fantastic game, but it's not always easy to film stuff and it does have its faults. I've had to use glitches and tricks to get a screen without a gun model, and there's no way of getting a free camera until recently when Blue Entertainment created their own free camera tool. And this shows you the lengths and dedication that people will go to get camera tools in a game like Battlefield 3. And these are things that are so common and readily available in other modern first person shooters. People want to film stuff in Battlefield 3. It's a beautiful looking game and it gives people the opportunity to create these things that have been brewing in their heads for such a long time. Imagine if Robert Stoneman, the guy who made the BF3 Machinima 1, had proper Battlerecorder tools. If he can make a video like that without them, imagine what he could have done with them. Back to that camera tool though. The Blue Entertainment free camera tool is classed as a hack by Punkbuster, and if you use it on a ranked server with Punkbuster enabled, you're going to get a global ban from the game. To use the tool, you have to have your own server, you've got to set it to unranked and also disable Punkbuster. You then have to join the game and put down an MAV. Once you put down the MAV, you then use an external program to scan for cameras in the game. You find out which one is your MAV, you copy that code and paste it into another program that runs an injector, and somehow it gives you a free camera. Don't ask me how this works, I've got absolutely no idea. The guy that made this, Hattie Watty, is either a wizard or he's got some insane coding skills. Anyways, we have to do something that elaborate and risk a global ban just to get a free camera. Does that not tell you how much our community want to have something like that in the game? Something that is such a basic feature in all of the other top multiplayer shooters. Look at Black Ops 2 as a prime example. The spectator mode and recorder in that game is so refined and easy to use. It's really embarrassing that Battlefield doesn't have something similar. Ultimately, a battle recorder and spectator mode in Battlefield 4 will do nothing but good for the game. It doesn't damage it, it doesn't degrade it in any way, why not add it? It just makes for brilliant fan service and business sense to me. DICE, just please do it. I wanted to end this section by saying that I think one of the reasons a game like Counter-Strike, which by the way came out in 1999, one of the reasons it lasted so long as a popular competitive game is because people could download replays and spectate live matches. That sort of thing inspires them to get better at their own game. They can download replays of the best players, learn tactics from the best teams and talk about it with their friends. It's just another cool aspect of having a spectator mode that keeps the buzz of the game alive. Imagine for a second that two of the biggest Battlefield teams are playing against each other in a tournament, whether that be on LAN or online. Now imagine that you can open up Battlelog and watch a live stream of that game with a map, with multiple camera angles, first person field of views. That would be so cool and it would be a great selling point for the game. Moving on from spectator mode and battle recorder, what about the actual game itself? What is stopping Battlefield from being a good competitive game? Now, before I start, I wanted to say that I know Battlefield games have never really been about competitive gaming. Battlefield has always revolved around big fun. If you play a Battlefield game, you're expecting servers with 64 players, jets in the sky, tanks roaming around, explosions, buildings falling down, and general public tomfoolery with friends. And Battlefield does that very well. There really is no other game that can give you that same experience, in my opinion. But why can't Battlefield have both at the same time? There's nothing wrong with giving the consumer more choice. What is stopping the game from having two game modes, one for that big public fun and one for tight infantry only competitive matches? You'd open Battlelog, there's the public tab, there's the competitive tab. You know what to expect. Now the reason I say infantry only is because myself and many other players I know feel that vehicles and infantry can never truly be balanced for a competitive game. 8v8 Battlefield competitive with vehicles just doesn't work. The infantry side of things is practically non-existent. It's more about who has the best jet pilot whilst the guys on the ground act as a permanent repair tool for the tanks. That is boring to play in and it's boring to watch. Now what I think works best in Battlefield 3 for example is 5v5 infantry only conquest, and if you've played it yourself you'll know what I mean. BF3 at the moment isn't a bad competitive game. On well designed maps like Seine Crossing, small 5v5 infantry is very fun and a constantly changing dynamic. It's very back and forth with multiple flanks and angles of attack thanks to the buildings you can enter. Even maps like Grand Bazaar, which are still quite linear, can be very fun at times because of all the long flanking routes. Saying that though, there are several problems with BF3 as a competitive game. And after all, the purpose of this video is to highlight those problems, offer alternatives, and hopefully see some of these ideas implemented into Battlefield 4. So what makes a good competitive game? One of the most important things is good sound design. First and foremost, you should have excellent surround sound clarity with footsteps and gunshots. If someone is behind me to my left, I should be able to hear that. The footsteps in BF3 are okay at the moment, but I think they could do with being a bit louder and a bit more pinpoint. Another very important aspect of good sound design are sound tells. So what do I mean by this? Well, in BF3 for example, if a player drops a medkit, a voice can be heard from his location. So he might say something like, "I'm dropping a medkit for you," and this can be heard by friendly and enemy players alike. Another example, an enemy player throws a grenade at your feet and your character then proceeds to yell, "Oh Jesus Christ, grenade." Again, audible by enemy and friendly players alike. Now some might say this is all well and good in public play because it adds to the immersion, it's pretty cool, and it's a bit more realistic maybe. But for competitive play, it's a terrible design choice because it forces the player to make a mistake rather than the player actively making a bad decision. As an example, I'm holding a doorway on a flag, an enemy player happens to fire a few shots near me and my player screams out, "I'm getting my shit pushed in here," or something along those lines because he's suppressed. Therefore, the enemy player knows where I am without me ever making a mistake. Fair enough, if I'd have peeked the corner and exposed myself or ran around making footsteps, then that's my fault. But because of the sound tell, I've been punished for doing nothing wrong. Sound tell should only give a player away because they've made a mistake, like running when they should have walked to make less noise rather than a random forced occurrence. DICE should give us the option to disable these sort of sound tells for competitive play and just keep that sort of stuff for the public side. Also, no BS perks like awareness or ghost in Call of Duty that affect your footsteps. If you do stuff like that, everyone just uses it and it becomes pointless. If you want to reduce the sound of your footsteps, you should change your stance. Walk, crouch, prone. That way it's a level playing field and the amount of noise you make is always a conscious player decision. So what else do I think is wrong with BF3 that could be improved on in BF4? Well, the next one is a biggie and it's what's commonly known as head glitching. Head glitching can be explained very simply. Dave here goes behind some cover, say a cinder block for example. Now from Dave's field of view it looks like lots of his body should be exposed and he can also see the entire body of the other player here. This is Steve. But from Steve's point of view, only Dave's head can be seen. Something doesn't quite add up there with the angles, and it also gives Dave a massive advantage over Steve. If Dave can see Steve's entire body and shoot at him, you'd imagine that Steve could at least see Dave's torso, but that isn't the case. Steve only has a little head to shoot at and it's very unlikely that he's going to win this battle. There are spots like this everywhere on Battlefield 3 maps and they cater far too much for defensive players. It heavily rewards passive players, and from my experience playing in BF3 competitive matches, the team that normally wins is the team that knows the most head glitch spots and can get to them the fastest. There are even some spots on the BF3 maps where players can head glitch and not be shot at all from in front of them. Stuff like this is very bad for competitive play and good balance. Now, I don't know whether that's an issue with the engine or the way that the field of view matches up with the character models, but it needs to be fixed. There's plenty of times in a BF3 match where I see a player head glitching and I won't even bother to try and take them out because I know that he's just got such a massive advantage on me and it's very unlikely I'm going to beat him from the front. I'll just leave him alone and look for another way around. But this isn't the case in other competitive shooters, and it does seem more pronounced in Battlefield 3. For example, there's never a time in Counter-Strike when I think I can't possibly hit someone who's camping behind a box. If I aim better than that person, I'm going to get him. But this just isn't the case in Battlefield 3 when you've got stuff like head glitching. Moving away from glitches now and onto the hotly debated Battlefield 3 suppression mechanic. So if you don't know already, in BF3, when bullets whiz really close by your character, your screen goes blurry and your recoil and bullet spread is significantly increased. I'm guessing suppression was added to the game to simulate being shot at. It was added to buff the support class to slow the pace of the game down sometimes, and also to have suppression as a viable tactic as it is actually used in real life combat scenarios. This is all well and good and an interesting mechanic for public play, but it's not fun and it doesn't work at all in a competitive environment. Simply put, suppression adds a random element into the game that takes control away from the player. Anything random in a competitive game equals bad news. Suppression also rewards players that miss. Hey, you even get points and medals and ribbons for missing in Battlefield 3. Hey, have you missed? Don't worry, we haven't forgot about you. Have some points. Bad, bad, bad. A mechanic like suppression should be completely removed from a competitive version of Battlefield, or server admins should have the ability to disable or enable it. Maybe even change the value of it until it's at a suitable medium. But let me demonstrate to you now why I think suppression should be removed completely and why I think it rewards players that miss. Bill here does an epic flank and ends up behind Joe, who's on the opposite team. Bill bottles it and he misses his first few shots. He gets nervous, he doesn't want to mess up, and he doesn't aim as well as he should have done. Now of course Joe notices this. He can hear Bill shooting, he can see him on the minimap, and so he turns around and aims at Bill to return fire. But it doesn't matter. Joe is already suppressed and his bullets are missing the target even though he's aiming directly at him. Joe is being punished here for not doing anything wrong, whereas Bill messed up but still gets a second chance. The game is giving Bill the advantage for missing in the first place. Bad. Joe reacted well and he should have had a chance to kill Bill, but the suppression removed that opportunity. This is how it should have gone down, and I can demonstrate this in a game like Counter-Strike. A guy flanks me and starts shooting at me from behind with a rifle. He misses his first few shots. I notice this, I turn around and I kill him with a headshot from a pistol. I've punished that player for missing. On that occasion I was better than him because he messed up in the first place. In a good competitive shooter there should be no second chances. DICE, please let us disable suppression for competitive matches in BF4. If you don't want to remove it, experiment with it. Why not try having suppression only on guns that the support class can use? That way the support class might actually become a viable option. Teams would need one player running support to suppress an area rather than 5 assaults just pre-firing peeking spots constantly so they know an enemy player can't repeat because they're suppressed. That's stupid. So what else is important? I briefly touched on it earlier, but map design of course. You can't have a well balanced game unless you've got well designed maps. Now some of the maps in BF3 are great for this sort of thing. As an example, Sen Crossing Conquest. 5v5 games on this map are usually played infantry only on the small 4 flag version, and in this iteration of the game they play out great. There are multiple flank routes, plenty of houses to drop into and windows to fire out of if you need some cover. The map has this sort of figure of 8 layout, and classically this works very well for competitive games. Even a map like Grand Bazaar, as I mentioned earlier, which can sometimes be too heavily focused on the B flag in the middle, is quite enjoyable in a competitive sense because of its multiple flanks. DICE, could we have more maps like those please, and less maps like Dammervan Peak and Operation Metro, which are basically straight lanes that pertain towards boring grindfest choke point gameplay rife with head glitching. And what about the look of the maps? How can that be changed for competitive play? In BF3 there are some visual effects that can't be disabled. The fog and the smoke that rolls by, for example, and obscures your vision, or the blinding light from the sun. Again, this is one of those things that is great for immersion and public play. Fancy graphics are cool and everything, but they just ruin competitive matches, and here's why. Anything that obscures your vision in this sort of game type is bad. Take the fog for example. People will say, well, if everyone on the server has it, it's fair, right? It's a level playing field. Well, to me, that's like saying, here you go guys, we've stuck a giant hamster in front of everyone's M16A3 blocking your vision, but don't worry, everyone has it, it's fair, right? But this isn't even the case on some of the maps. Depending on where you're standing or where the sun might be, one team will have an advantage. If I stand in a certain spot I can see people but they can't see me. Very bad. Give us the option to disable these sort of effects for competitive play. And why not have a competitive version of each map? Do it like Hidden Path did with CSGO. They have the public version of the map which has got all the props and particle effects, it looks pretty, and then they've got the SE version of the map for competitive play. It's simple and it works well. And this is why I think having competitive Battlefield completely separate from public Battlefield and tailor-made would be a brilliant thing. It'd have its own rule sets, its own maps, all of which can be adjusted by admins. Now I'm not talking about mod tools here because EA and DICE have clearly stated that there'll never be mod tools for Battlefield 3 and probably Battlefield 4. It's just not going to happen. They're completely against it and I can't see that changing. They don't like people tinkering around with their game files and their engine, and that's fair enough, it's their property. So how about just giving server admins all these options in Battlelog instead, in a controlled environment? That way people wouldn't have to break into the game files and inject EXEs to make a pro mod. They'd just have it all there on Battlelog, moderated and safe. You log in, you've got a public tab, and then you've got the competitive tab. If you're a server admin, from here you can edit the settings of your server, you can disable suppression, fog effects, you can select the SE competitive maps, you can change the headshot damage, adjust spawn protection rate, and eventually after debate and testing the competitive scene would come to a common competitive rule set that was accepted as the norm. Now there are already people discussing this sort of thing over on MordorHQ.com in detail if you want to get involved in that discussion. Still, what if DICE don't want to go down that route? It's their game after all, and they've said multiple times that they make the game that they want you to play. Well, if that's the case, then why not do something like Valve did for CSGO? They invited around 20 players from 4 of the world's top teams to go to Valve headquarters in Seattle and playtest CSGO before it was even announced. They recorded the footage and they got feedback from the players, and from this feedback they moulded and changed the competitive game mode into something that was good. Why can't DICE do something like this for BF4, or even run a closed beta specifically designed for this sort of thing? Interaction with the community is good. Again, let's look at CSGO as an example. Valve and Hidden Path made some decisions along the way that were frowned upon by the vast majority. As an example, originally they limited the number of defuse kits available to a team to 1 or 2. This was a bad idea. The competitive community complained and Valve owned up and said, "Look guys, we tried something, it didn't work out, and now we've changed it back for you." That sort of interaction with the community is great, and there's no shame in holding your hand up and admitting something didn't work out. Small things like that go a long way. Another pet peeve I have is dying around corners, or when on your screen your character appears to be in cover. Your client tells you you're safely around the corner, but the other guy shooting at you can still see you, and because of the client side hit registration, you're killed. Stuff like that is terrible for competitive play, and it really puts people off. Sort of related to that too, this is one of the most annoying things in Battlefield 3, and it's got me killed on many occasions. Now when a player does the vault animation, they are seemingly invincible until they've completed that animation. Bad. This needs to be fixed and not appear in future Battlefield games. A player should not be invincible because he's vaulted over an object. You can track the target perfectly and still not get any hit registration. Fancy animations like this affect hitboxes and should not take precedence over hit registration. I also think that some of the elements such as the revive mechanic and spawn protection could be tweaked for competitive play. Why do I have to stand up when I'm revived to fully accept a revive? Why can't I stay prone on the floor instead of standing up into a hail of bullets? Why after 1 second or so can I not have the ability to switch to my primary weapon and worm my way into some cover? I mean, does the accept revive mechanic even need to be in the competitive game mode at all? As for spawn protection, I'm a firm believer that if you spawn on a squad mate, you shouldn't get any spawn protection at all. You've taken a risk, you could see from the spawn screen what was happening around that squad member before you spawned in. Why should you get 2.5 seconds of invulnerability unless you move? I think spawning on a flag is fair enough, but not spawning on a squad mate. Whilst we're talking about squads, I'd also like to say that if the chosen competitive game mode was 5 on 5, you should be able to have 5 guys in one squad as an option, as well as 4-1 or 3-2. Squad size shouldn't be limited for competitive play. Another element of Battlefield 3 that I don't think works well for competitive play is 3D spotting. When you've got a team of 5 players communicating with each other and using sound and the minimap effectively, you've got a pretty good idea of where the enemy team players are. You don't need 3D spotting in a competitive scenario, and one area where it really falls flat on its face is when smoke grenades are used. Now first, I have to applaud DICE for the smoke effect in Battlefield 3. It's actually useful, it's volumetric, it can provide significant cover for you, and it's hard to see in and out of. However, it's made entirely useless by 3D spotting. If my team tried to mount a push on a flag and we use smokes to cover our entrance, it doesn't really matter when the opposite team can just spam spot and just shoot a load of red triangles through the smoke, thus resulting in our deaths or the failure of our advance. If 3D spotting is to be left in the game, I definitely do not think it should work through a smoke grenade. It totally negates the purpose of the smoke grenade in the first place. And what about experimenting with different game modes? Why can't BF4 test the water a little bit here? I'm talking about tried and tested competitive game modes like Destruction from Counter-Strike or Search and Destroy from COD. These type of round-based 1 life per round games work really well in a competitive sense. DICE shouldn't be afraid to experiment with new game modes. Test the water a little bit and see how it turns out. If it doesn't work out, then just don't do it. Simple. Maybe DICE could make 5 specific maps catered just for this sort of game mode in Battlefield 4. Why do they have to be based off existing maps like Conquest or Rush? Tailor the map to the game mode. Not every map works with every game mode, so I guess maybe it's time to be more unique and specific. It'd be great to see 5 tailor-made specific maps for search and destroy in Battlefield 4. I personally think a round-based destruction mode with 2 bomb sites, one side attacking and one side defending, could work great in a Battlefield infantry-only game. The revive mechanic would probably have to be removed, but I don't see a problem with keeping something like medkits in. It might lead to an interesting dynamic. Throw in the destructibility of Frostbite 2 and you can have some pretty cool scenarios on your hands. Imagine making your own route into a bomb site by blowing up a couple of walls with C4 or a grenade, giving the defending team more routes and entrances to cover. Competitive modes that give the attacking team the advantage can be very exciting to watch. I'm going to start wrapping things up now, and if you've managed to get this far in the video without falling asleep, then congratulations to you. But this is something that I know a lot of people care about, and I hope it's something that DICE realise we want to see in Battlefield 4. Remember as well, the things that I've said in this video are just my opinion. It's okay to disagree with me, other people will have different ideas and suggestions, that's fine, these are just mine. Overall, I think games developers need to realise the potential of a really good competitive game, and I really believe that Battlefield 4 could be that next big competitive FPS game if it's done right. With the next gen consoles on the horizon, there'll be a big hole to fill in that section of the market. Also, with rumours of the PlayStation 4 being able to record and stream games itself, the rise of internet gaming videos and esports will only continue to grow. In my opinion, DICE have a huge opportunity with Battlefield 4. They've got Battlelog up and running already, which can be a great starting point for competitive matchmaking and a league system. I mean, it's already integrated with the Battlefield 3 ESL Versus system, and it works great in that respect. Most of the hard work is done already, we just need that actual competitive game mode option to go alongside it. And there are several reasons why BF3 never took off as a competitive game, as we've discussed in this video. But one that I haven't really mentioned is accessibility. Imagine out of those 15 to 20 million people who've bought Battlefield 3, how many of them didn't try playing Battlefield 3 in a competitive sense because it was so hard to get to, or they didn't even know leagues like the ESL existed. Now imagine how many of those guys would have tried it if there was just a separate tab on Battlelog where they could dive right in. They join a party with other random players or their friends, they get assigned a server, a team and a map. They've then got voice comms in-game that they can use rather than on Battlelog, so they can communicate with each other. Competitive gaming is great. Being in a team, running tactics, playing to win versus good players is fun. When you win it feels great, and when you lose it's a challenge and it makes you want to get better. If you've never tried it, you should definitely give it a go. It's a hell of a lot of fun and you won't be disappointed. Now I'm an optimistic person and I have hope. And I think that DICE can do a great job with Battlefield 4. Recently I watched an interview that Battlefield Podcast did with Daniel Matros, aka Zinto, ex-community manager and now producer at DICE. In the interview he expresses his thoughts on esports, and I really like what he was saying. I think he's got his head screwed on, and I think he has what it takes to bring a proper esports mode to Battlefield. And I know someone like Daniel is interested in esports because he tweets about it all the time, he talks about it, and he's also been the manager of the Epsilon Esports Battlefield 3 team, arguably one of the best Battlefield 3 teams in the world. Daniel knows his stuff, and I'm hoping that he can portray to the publisher and to the other developers how important this sort of stuff is to a lot of people. And I guess that's it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you agree with what I'm saying, give me a thumbs up, maybe share the video, post it on forums, send it to the Battlefield developers, but please don't spam them. If you disagree with me, let me know that too. DICE, please realise the potential of a really good competitive esports game. If you do it right, it's going to be a massive success. Have a nice day guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.